in front of us. None of you have read it. None of you have examined it. None of you know what the heck what this replaces. So I'm for adopting this as presented today, both the Joint Powers Agreement and the Operations Manual. And if we have to make some further amendments between, then we'll discuss it with the city, and the city will discuss it with the county, and I bet you we can work it out amicably in the interest of both public entities. And that's what the COG is supposed to serve. The city as an entity and the county as an entity. It's not supposed to serve this big independent agenda where the county's out of the loop or the city can be construed as out of the loop. I mean, we should never have another vote, in my opinion, where 2 city council members and 1 board member are outvoted by 3 public members. That's pointless. Where's the accountability there? That doesn't work. So those are my comments, and I would hope that the board would adopt both the Joint Powers Agreement and the Operations Manual that's in front of us today. It doesn't satisfy everything. There'll have to be additional work. But, if we continue it and say take everybody's comment and then hold another huge public meeting, I mean, we'll be months. You know how much staff time will be taken? I mean, we'd have a huge amount of staff time between the city and the county invested in this document. I mean, either you're going to proceed with this, or you're just going to kill it by, instead of 1,000 wounds, you'll kill it with 1,000,000 wounds. So I'm for proceeding with what's in front of us today. Thank you.
I forgot to ask staff to answer the questions, but I will. Would you like me to have them do that first before I go to you?
I'm happy to have questions answered before I speak.
Tom, I should have had you answer any of the questions. There weren't too many of them, as I saw most of them were comments. I think Mr. Valentine started with the financial report on the grant. I don't know that you can answer that, but he did ask the question about expansion items in the JPA agreement.
I'm sorry, but I am unclear as to what the expansion items were being.
Well, I was too. I thought I might have missed that.
I believe it may have had something to do with the possibility of additional incorporations and how the COG might expand. Am I correct in interpreting that?
Having lived through one of those, it would be, in my opinion, inappropriate for this JPA agreement to contemplate what would occur should another jurisdiction incorporate. That would mean that there would be 2 cities and 1 county, and at that point, the formula for voting would really need to be looked at again, whether or not there would be the same representation on the board. I lived through that in a transportation agency in Sacramento where we had 6 cities and 1 county, and the discussion of fair representation took months to resolve, and I wouldn't want to anticipate the outcome of that discussion in this document, where it's only 1 city and 1 county that are being contemplated.
To go along with that, just to tail on to that, if there's an incorporation, it also has to go to LAFCO. And LAFCO would have lots of hearings and lots of conditions, and you would have to do the property tax transfer, and it would be a very long, drawn-out process. And I'm sure one of the conditions within that would be I would think, would be to address the creation of a new city as far as COG representation.
I may be mistaken, but I thought I read an aspect of that in here.
That was on Tim's comments.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It was noticeably absent from our draft.
All right.
Much was said about the elimination of the public members, limiting 2/3 of the public members, dealing a death knell to public participation. That wasn't the goal of this. What we were trying to do was increase public participation by opening up the meetings where the decisions are actually made, at the TAC meetings where the projects are identified, discussed, and the preferred projects are brought forward to the board for approval. That doesn't happen right now. The TAC meetings are just agency staff. It is, in my opinion, again, appropriate to open those up as Brown Act meetings, since policy is being discussed, decisions are being made on public funds, and recommendations are being made for an elected body on what to approve and what not to carry forward. So Again, that was intended to increase public participation, not decrease it. Term of a public member being more or less than 1 year, or more than 1 year, 1 year or more. That was a concern expressed by the city. We are open to discussing that with them. If 1 year is too little, then we can come up with a more appropriate time frame.
I don't remember them discussing it at their city council meeting.
These are notes that were passed to the public or our department regarding a meeting that happened between the city and the county.
What meeting was that, Mr. Garcia?
I received the comments from Supervisor Tryon on the meeting that occurred between the city and the county.
The one that I wasn't invited to?
That's correct, Marita. And let me tell you why. Number one, for two reasons. Number one, you can't have 4 COG members meet to discuss the COG. That's a Brown Act violation. You'd have to have a full COG meeting. That was not the intent of the city council. So when the city council realized that they could not have we could not meet in that matter, they had a discussion, and I said I would meet with them alone. And I think that's entirely appropriate. It is District 4. They are my constituents. They have a right to talk to their county supervisor any more than you can't meet with a group in Arnold unless I'm present. I mean,
that's fine. You can come. I have a meeting
that makes no sense at all. And this was legally impossible to implement.
No, it wasn't.
And yes, it was. And I have every right to meet with my own constituents. I am their representative. I am the representative for the citizens of Angels Camp. And in fact, I live within the city limits and proud to do so. Thank you.
You keep saying this is a document between the city and the county. The city council said they wanted, the direction was 2 of their council members and us
that
to
meeting
meet
could not take place.
As the city and the county.
Can you speak into your microphone? We've got people back here that's training to hear, so please speak into your microphone.
Well, thank you, Mr. Governor. So I think that meeting is inappropriate for you to have, given the direction of the city council at their public meeting.
Why don't you let the city council take care of the city council? I don't think the Board of Supervisors needs to dictate to the city council what their operating procedures should be. And I'll just reiterate that I can meet with my own constituents when I choose. And the City of Angels are in District 4, and they are my constituents. And so I met with them, which I feel I have a right to do at any time.
I think that is obvious. I'm not going to get into a spitting match with you. I disagree. Okay. No, the public comment is closed, Mr. Caldwell. It's
Regarding?
Pardon, no.
It's over.
No,
We'll be
no,
here all
I
night.
can respond if I want. I choose not to respond because he's wrong.
Regarding Gary Caldwell's comments on the
that's fine.
proposed agenda.
Actually, I think we're still on the subject of them answering questions that came from the public,
Okay.
after which I actually believe it's my turn to speak.
Thank you. Please proceed, Mr. Garcia.
Regarding Mr. Caldwell's comments, personal tax aside, this county did go to the COG board. You'll recall, we came to the Board of Supervisors first with an allocation plan for the OWP with board approval on the projects that we were seeking funding on. We approached the COG through the TAC on those projects. Those projects were, through the process, it wasn't clean, transparent, nor easy for the agencies to work together to fund those projects. What was stated about those projects being available for, or the reserves being available for funding a local match of projects, that's exactly what they were used for. We were using it to fund the local match for RSDP projects and some bridge projects we have, some safety projects. So it was a completely appropriate use of that funding. So the assertion that it was not, that there was a grab for funds, well, there was an allocation of funding made, but it was completely consistent with the COG's direction and the County Board of Supervisors' direction. And I believe that the county as a whole, and the constituents within the county are in a better place for that as these desperately needed safety projects, these bridge projects, are now underway and getting funded. As for, well, there have always been concerns raised over who manages what phase of a project. And until this matter is resolved, I don't believe that there will be a clean way of addressing, notifying the public as to who to contact regarding the project. Let's see. Other questions?
I think
Any questions on the public members? And again,
they're mostly, I think, comments.
there were
versus
questions on page 2. Let's see. What are regional plans? The regional plans are the TOD has charge over, or the RTP and the RTIP, the Regional Transportation Improvement Plan, the Regional Transportation Plan. Those are the guidelines for transportation development within the county. What feeds into those plans, hopefully, are the county's circulation element from the general plan and the city's circulation element from their plans. The next question was, what are community groups? Those are groups that come together for the purpose of proposing a project, that have a goal, a community plan, something like that. The goal here was to have a project sponsor so that the community groups' plans are not conflicting with established policy or established plans or proposed plans from the county and city, that they can be incorporated with those plans rather than being at odds with them. That's the point of getting a project sponsor. Let's see. That's pretty much the questions that I had from the public members. There were a couple of corrections as to when people received documents. The documents were provided on 8/23 to all of the agencies, city, county, and college. So there has been about a month's worth of time that's transpired between now and then. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Walensky.
Well, first, because a few names have been called out during the course of our discussion so far, I wanted to call out all of yours. Thank you for being here. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for keeping most of them on the non-personal and policy nature of it. Welcome back, those of you old-timers who've been through both COG and LTCs and public works departments. I think at least one of you has hit the trifecta, and others have had quite a lot of background in this room. I think there's a couple of things I'd like to maybe a little housekeeping and then comments falling into a number of different categories. But the housekeeping part has to do with the format under which these discussions take place. I've asked this on a number of occasions, but not since you arrived, Tom. It's very helpful for me when we're comparing big documents to have the format for the new proposals to include the old document, not afterwards as an appendix, but actually in line-outs for things that are deleted and underlines for things that are added.
Can I respond to that? We had the same request from the city, and the problem was this is such a complete rewrite of the document that those sections really no longer were relevant.
They're relevant to me. I like to know not just what's new, but what we're giving up in the process and so the lineouts do matter to me. And I respectfully re-request that all departments give that to us, because trying to translate between two completely different documents is even tougher than when there's just a few changes. That said, I think that having listened to the people in this room describe their concerns, they fall into a number of categories, and I've sort of listed them. We have structural issues, and people have raised the question of what's the structure of the COG, how do we make decisions, who makes decisions. We have policy issues, and there's certainly a lot of people in the room that have been concerned about policy directions, or, and there's certainly been some COG projects that raised a lot of significant policy discussions here in this very room on other occasions. We seem to have political issues, different perspectives, different ideologies that inform us in our debates. We have procedural issues. A lot of people are talking about transparency and how we communicate with one another, and what's hidden and what's not, and what's public and what's not. We have, along with that, protocols. What are the specific rules through which our procedures are exercised? We have personnel issues sometimes, where people have a dispute about how our personnel, or one or another, is performing. And finally, and in my view, maybe one of the most significant aspects here, is that we have relational issues. Relations between people and relations between organizations. So I'd like to try to talk about those things a little bit. Again, as Tom, there was so much to try to digest both in the documents and your comments that it's hard to put something cohesive in a response together, but here's my attempt at it. For me, I ask, all right, if we've got all those issues that people are concerned about, what are the problems in each category, and shouldn't that be the basis upon which we approach the fixes? If something's broken, we should fix it, and if something's not, maybe we shouldn't. And if things are relational in nature, should we do a complete structural overhaul or change all of our policies, procedures, and representations if we're simply having a hard time getting along? And I think there's reasons for this. I think we got here, and I've talked about this before to different groups. There's a number of new faces in the room, so I think I'll repeat myself a bit. I think that COG has a long history, as did the LTC here in this county, and that overall they've brought millions of dollars and a lot of projects, and that's a good thing. I also think that the COG staff that the old staff, the new staff, and everything in between, I think has worked in good faith and made good efforts with considerable skill and difficult circumstances, and I value their presence here in this county. I also think that the county has been through, as people noted, a lot of changes, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of staff overhaul. We had personnel issues, in case you hadn't been reading. And we're very fortunate to have two really good new people responsible for our planning department and our public works department. And I want to recognize them as part of what I'm talking about. And I think the fact that they're here has in itself made some changes that we need to now sort of renegotiate our terms and arrangements. Because I think that during a very hard period for planning, where the planning demands were high, and the staffing, by the way, I still don't think that even if you combine the COG and the county, that we're overstaffed for the things that are in front of us. So the level of cooperation and coordination and the ending of redundancies, as people have been concerned about, is an important issue for me. But it is true that there was a period where the county really was unable, for a wide range of issues, a wide range of reasons, to fulfill our full obligations in relation to some projects, one of them grant funded. And I think that might have not been the case if we'd had the two people that I just mentioned in their places. So now that we have them, and now that COG has actually maybe had some mission creep in relation to doing some things that it wasn't its natural territory, but they honorably tried to complete some things. Maybe we shouldn't blame each other for all of this, but start thinking about what we're going to do now that we have additional resources, and can we manage to renegotiate the terms of cooperation. And I think that what the document before us is an attempt to do that. although apparently not entirely welcome. So I'd like to sort of take the pieces of it, and I really also want to honor Marita for having gone through every last word of this. I'm going to go through every last issue in it and try to respond to it, and I think the two together actually form something of a complete package. The first thing on my mind is the relationship between the City of Angels and Calaveras County. Boy, has there been a lot of history and a lot of water under that bridge. But Tom's correct when he says that times have changed, and we do have a new board, and we do have a new city council, and it is time for us to, anybody who thinks that on a COG board there's going to be a city side and a county side, I'd hope we'd never find our way to that again. Because transportation is indeed regional, planning must be regional. Angels doesn't stand alone. It has a state highway going straight through the square in the middle of it. So interagency cooperation is absolutely essential for that town, and it's essential for this county. And the idea that there are separate, distinct, and fundamentally contradictory interests involved in that transaction is just plain old-fashioned and wrong. I like old-fashioned sometimes, but this one is fossilizing. So structure-wise, the administrative committee, I'm surprised to find my generally libertarian colleague suggesting a new layer of bureaucracy in an already complex relationship. When you have a personnel issue, you deal with it on a personnel basis. If you have a structural issue, you deal with it on a structural issue. And I'm just not sure whether we're mixing and matching all these things into one big document that gets it all jumbled up. But the idea of an admin committee substituting for an administration that already exists, actually three administrations that already exist,